Allah Rahman Rahim. This is William Safir, your host uh, from Atlanta, Georgia. I want to welcome everyone, especially our wonderful, beautiful members of our class, the University Online Learning course. We are very excited and anxious to have our international instructor, Benjamin Bilal, to continue the subject matter of the cosmic Quran and cosmic DNA. Uh, you know, I don't think we can think too big. I'm reminded of uh, Imam of called him Imam W. Muhammad, of course, but of his father, uh, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They say he only received a third grade education, but the man had a mind of uh, a, a post-college graduate. I can recall doing the what he called the theology of time, of all things, the theology of time. He expanded my young mind. I was in college at that time. I was there for a couple of years, didn't get a degree, but nevertheless, spent a little time in a college environment at a what's supposed to have been a very advanced academic institution. But it took this little man with the so-called third grade education to really expand my thinking cosmically. And he had us thinking, I know I certainly did. I was a young minister in the Nation of Islam back then, while I was still in college. And he had me go to the Encyclopedia Britannica and whatever I could find in terms of books, unabridged dictionaries, and I was looking and chasing the thinking that path that he had opened up in my mind, looking at the total triple darkness. He talked about uh, uh, a a light that revealed itself in total triple darkness. And he started me thinking about this electromagnetism, as they called it back then. It was Elijah Muhammad that did that. So this experience that we are continuing now in the light of the real light and of the Quran uh, is, is certainly engaging for me. Now, if you haven't done so, I don't like to ask you to do anything that I haven't already done. Now, if you can see this, uh, this is my gratitude journal from this morning. So if you haven't done so yet, get your pen, get your writing materials out, and do your at least 10 things that you have to be grateful for. I had an opportunity just a few days ago to engage someone who was considering suicide. And she was homeless, and she was really, really down. And so we had an opportunity to engage her in conversation, and we finally got to the point after some extensive going back and forth, to a point where I just reminded her that if you can breathe in and out, you got something to be grateful for. And she had to agree, you know. So your gratitude journal is important because it puts you in touch with Allah's infinite, we're talking about cosmically, right? Allah's infinite mercy and grace. And I mean, I can't capture that in words, actually. Uh, I can recall having the opportunity and the attempt to establish, as Imam W.D. Muhammad encouraged us to establish community life, the fullness of it. He had motivated us with intense desire, and it hasn't left me yet, to establish community life and its fullness since. Some of you might remember this, this concept of that he stressed with us of New Africa. He called it the industrious community, and he had actually had an architect reduce it to plans. you know. So we have to continue this level of thinking. I can recall having the opportunity and homeschooling my own children. We were on, we shared 80 acres with some other Muslims at that time in Texas. And we had a pond where they could go and ponder, like Musa. We also had a wooded area where they could go and explore the fitra, and we had a one particular area where we had a large, we call it the big oak. It's large oak tree where you can go and sit up under the big oak and just think, and the children would go, and of course they would play under it because it was hot in Texas. They would go in the shade and they would spend a lot of time there. Uh, but during that time there, we were homeschooling, and I was blessed to homeschool all seven of my children. And I used to encourage them to think, and I would tell them, that thought travels. Yeah, so just think about it. There was a star that we had been referred to. It's called Sirius, and I would have them think about the North Star, and how and its brightness. And then I would ask, do you think thought travels? And they would, in their young minds, they would kind of wrestle with the question, and I let them know you just traveled to a star, and now I'm bringing your mind back here to our discussion in our class right now. So the mind has this ability, this awesome ability to be able to engage this whole cosmic reality. So this subject matter, the cosmic Quran and cosmic DNA. See, and uh, Instructor Bilal is wise enough to, at the same time while he's expanding our thinking, he's also enabling this ability in us to widen our scope, broaden our scope, but then also to bring it back, you know. And this thing that they call electromagnetism, of course, we are correcting it, upgrading the notion and saying really the feminine energy, the feminine principle.
Okay, well, my class. What you
Uh,
say? My
would you please mute yourselves until the instructor comes on and announces the protocol for this particular class? Thank you, appreciate it. But this whole idea of electromagnetism, we have upgraded the notion. Scientifically, we have the courage and to do that. Again, led by somebody like Elijah Muhammad and his son, Imam W.D. Muhammad. Uh, and even the process that W.D. Farad gave us. There was a lot of mystery and fiction involved in that, but it was an expansion of our thinking. But we have upgraded the notion to, instead of electromagnetism, we've upgraded it to turning it around like it should be, uh, acknowledging the primacy of the feminine principle, and saying, uh, how can we call it? Magnet, magnetic or magnetical electricism. So the magnetism coming first, electric principle following. And as we know, the principle, the electric principle is that of one that goes out in search of, and the magnetic principle is that one that opens up and draws to itself, or magnetizes, draws to itself, and as a result can be influenced or impacted by that which is drawing to itself. So we thank Allah, we thank Allah, we thank Allah, the source creator, for allowing us to come into this level of thinking, to operate even in your home environment, which is where the most, we talked about the serious star, right? The most serious work takes place in your domicile, in your home. And the level of thinking that we must come to in order to be effective, even in our home environment, is this level of cosmic thinking. That's the time and age that we're living in. And the blessing is that the level of thinking that allows blessings to come into and to be able to share with the whole global community, this whole global village, using the science, pardon me, the science and the technology, if you would, if you will, of nunetics, it's allowing us to not only open ourselves up, again, the feminine principle, but also to anchor our feet firmly on the ground, in the earth. You say, well, we don't live in the earth, but we live on the earth. No, we actually, the earth not only includes the dirt below our feet, but it also includes what's called the atmosphere or the environment above it. So we live in the earth. But just to anchor ourselves in reality, says El-Haq, the reality. Allah is the reality, and makes it very clear in the surah on Hajj, El-Hajj, where Allah describes uh, that quality of himself as being the reality or the only reality, as is sometimes translated. So praise be to Allah. We thank Allah uh, for your presence. We thank Allah for International Instructor Benjamin Bilal, who has just uh, opened up his screen. So that tells me that it's time for me to take this talking stick and pass it on over to my brother.
Yes, sir. All right. And we thank Allah for you. And we thank Allah for each and every member of the class who was able to make it into the portal today. And also to those who are not necessarily registered members of the class who would like to register. And if this is your first time, maybe there's something that we might say today to encourage you to make that move more sooner than later. Pardon me. Throat is a little bit scratchy. I've been talking all week, but that's what I do. So we're going to continue. Thank you, William Safir, for what is always a thought-provoking group of words, group of instructions, actually, that he gives you every week. And whether you realize it or not, he's teaching at the most sophisticated level of Nunetics understanding that a person can possibly put together and deliver. He's so smooth at it that you probably don't realize that that's what he's doing. But he's some of the best help that I have, along with many others of you who will be getting a chance to exhibit your in-depth knowledge of what you've been learning for the past months or maybe few years that you've been a part of this experience that I call the Nunetics experience. Many of you have been a part of this journey for 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years. Some of you have been following a lot of what I've been saying for over 10 years. That's more than a few of you who have been following what I've been saying for over 10 years. That's a long time to experience the length and breadth of the language that we've been establishing with the help of Allah. And I'm sure that it's going to pay off for you in unimaginable dividends. So all you have to do is stick with the formula, as Imam W.D. Muhammad was known to say. So we're going to jump right into the part 2 discussion of the cosmic Quran and cosmic DNA. Give me just a moment to pull up my notes. So as always, we begin at the beginning with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and that is with the signature of Allah, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. We thank Allah for allowing us to breathe the breath of life once again this AM as we awoke from our slumber or our sleep and were graced to see another sunrise and to breathe some more of this wonderful oxygen. Even if it's not what you want it to be, it's enough for you to be here. We thank Allah for for that level of life, even if the air is polluted or contains contaminants or whatever, I still say it's better than waking up to no air at all. You know, waking up in a situation of suffocation or decline, severe decline to the point of where your life becomes exhausted. And I don't think any of us are ready for that particular turn of events, as we might call them. We want to continue living. That's in our fitra nature to want to live. It's in our fitra nature to not want to conclude at any particular moment unless we really truly feel as though we've lived the best of our life and we're ready to return to the presence of Allah. But I want you to know, as you're thinking about returning to his presence, that we never actually leave his presence. Every soul that appears on the back of this earth is already in the presence of Allah and will be until we actually, quote unquote, return to Allah. The returning to Allah that the Quran is speaking of is actually the returning to Allah's fitrah. It's not returning to a presence as such. His presence is to be seen and felt in his fitrah. What do we mean by fitrah? We're talking about the natural order that Allah created to do many, many things, but a very important part of the things that Allah intends for our fitrah to do is to educate the human intellect. Educate the human intellect. That's very important. And the most important part of that education, if you will, is to pay attention to the fitrah. If you're not paying attention to the natural order, that's what we mean by fitrah, the natural order as that order has been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, highly glorified is Allah. If we're not paying attention, then the intellect is not being fed the nutrition that it needs to grow and expand and establish itself in the cosmos. And that's what we're talking about today. The subject is the cosmic Quran and cosmic DNA. Now, you might say, well, I've never heard of this cosmic Quran thing that you're talking about, instructor. Where are you getting this stuff? I don't see anything about any cosmic Quran in the Quran. Well, it's probably because you're not paying enough attention. Now, if you listen to today's discourse, you'll come closer to understanding, if not totally understanding, what we're meaning when we use the phrase cosmic. It's in today's lesson, so pay attention. Waiting for just a few more people to get in. I think some people may be having an issue with the internet service. I see a couple of people who have to keep signing in. I don't know what that's about. But nevertheless, we're going to move on. Again, beginning at the beginning, by recognizing the signature of Allah, and that signature represents merciful benefits as well as merciful redemption. When you're experiencing those two things in your life, when you're experiencing them, you are absolutely, positively in the presence of Allah. And you'll know it when it happens. You'll know when Allah has forgiven you for something. You'll know absolutely when Allah has benefited you in some way. Your soul knows these things. And that's the beautiful thing about this life also. So there are 46 chromosomes. Listen carefully. There are 46 chromosomes contained within your human body, the human body, not the animal body, not the insect body. The only body that contains 23 chromosomes each, one set of them male, the other set female, totaling 46 chromosomes. The only species that contains this number of chromosomes is the human species. So make that your first point. The words man and woman are repeated 23 separate times in the Quran. Follow the pattern of these numbers that I'm establishing. The word man and woman are repeated 23 separate times in the Quran. Prior to the discovery of microbiology, there was no way of knowing the count of chromosomes in animals and humans. So that's a 20th century discovery, microbiology. The Quran was revealed somewhere about the 7th century. Look at how long ago that was, that this is mentioned in the Quran without the advantage of human beings even knowing the count of chromosomes, because we didn't have a sophisticated enough looking glass to be able to count chromosomes on the microbiologic level. In the surah called An-Najm, translated as the star, which you're going to see below, within the, listen to the numbers again, between the 45th and 46th ayat, between those two ayat, Allah states, وَأَنَّهُ خَلَقَ الْزَوْجَيْنِ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. Translated into English, then he, meaning Allah, did create in pairs, male, that would be a dhakkar, and female, that would be al-untha. Al-dhakkar, male, al-untha, female. Dhakkar is related to the word dhikr. And dhikr, as most of you should know, means to remember a thing. If you're doing dhikr, you're remembering, you're recollecting. And the recollection should be mostly directed towards Allah, remembering the good things that Allah has done for us, that He has provided for us, that He has established for us in our longevity on this earth, inshallah. That's the dhikr that the Quran is mostly referring to when you see that word in the Quran, dhikr. But the important message in that word is that it is related consonantally to the word dhakr. And dhakr, as you can see here, means male. Male. You know, when you're thinking about something over and over again, the English word for that level of thinking is called mulling, M-U-L-L-I-N-G, to mull. If somebody's trying to get your attention and it's difficult to get your attention because you're constantly thinking on something that happened to you in the past or something that you need to do in the near future, maybe, they call that mulling. And the word mull, M-U-L-L, is related to the English word male, M-A-L-E, that we're discussing right now, because mulling is a feature of the intellect and how it processes information. So when you read about males and females in the Quran, don't just think you're reading about biology. You're reading about a process related to the functionality in your human intellect, whether you be male or female. Females also have the capability of mulling. They do it all of the time when it comes to their children. They constantly thinking on their, are they okay? What do they need for the next school season? See, all of these questions that come up even in the mind of a woman is still mulling. This is why in the word female, you also have the word male, because both men and women have the capacity to mull, to think deeply, to think on something over and over again. So she is also experiencing a level of what the Quran calls dhikr. And that also means that she also contains the properties necessary for dhakr. She also contains the male principle. She's a female. She contains the male principle. But we're talking now on the level of deep science, not just biology. We're talking on the level of metaphysics, if you will, when we say that the female is also a male It's on the level of biology. Again, they stuck it right into her name, female. But most of us miss that because we're so busy thinking on the divisions that we've been presented in science instead of the cohesion, the agreements that creation makes with itself by the grace of Allah. Creation agrees to operate together so that the outcome might be more substantial and beneficial. So that's adh-dhakr, related to dhikr, thinking. Allah actually calls her in the Quran adh-dhakarat, which is the feminine form of adh-dhakr. The male is adh-dhakr, the female is called by Allah adh-dhakarat, with the feminine T on the end, the ta marbuta it's called. These are wonderful findings. And the female is called al-untha. And I'm pretty sure that this is where the English-speaking world gets the word enter. Untha, enter, you know, the TH and the T sound are interchangeable. So untha and enter, the R is an addition, just means that which moves a thing forward and evolves a thing. That's what ra, that letter, means in English and in Arabic. If I say, go get in the car and meet me in 20 minutes in downtown Raleigh, the car, you see that R in car, it means the same thing as the R in enter. It means that which moves a thing forward. When you enter a place, you enter a building, you enter an elevator, it's because you're seeking to move your movement forward. You're going to a meeting, you're going home, you enter the house with your key. Those are movements. And hopefully what's on the other end of that movement is something that's going to allow you to live a better situation. You're in the house now, you're not traveling the road, your nerves are not bent out of shape from rush hour traffic, and you're in the house and now you can relax. See, that's an evolution in your mind. I'm home, I can relax, I can take a nap, I can eat dinner, whatever it is you think. Those things are evolutionary developments in the aftermath of your moves, your movements. So the letter R represents forward movement, but also evolutionary movement. At the end of the movement should be some form of upliftment, some form of evolution, if you will. So untha and enter are essentially the same concept, is the main point. Untha and enter are essentially making the same point. And as all of us know, I guess from elementary school on up, if you study the differences in the sexes, the differences in the genders, we know that the male gender has a male instrument that with certain levels of stimulation will point outward. It will go outward. Well, that's also what dhakr is pointing to, no pun intended. Dhakr is pointing to the male's ability in his male apparatus, once stimulated particularly, to point forward. Because that pointing forward, if it's in the right crevice, if it's in the right place and time, it's going to produce a fluid that can cause another further evolution to take place within the belly of the female. It's called pregnancy, as you all know. So all of these things are related to each other. They are things that we don't think about. And Allah makes it clear in the Quran that most of these things human beings are not even thinking about. Most of the really, I would say, mentally stimulating and mentally nutritious information that science is constantly knocking on the door of the intellect trying to introduce, most of that information is not thought of, period, by most human beings. It's really just a waste of information or a waste of the ayat, the instructing science. And Allah tells us this in the Quran. He says that in the construction of the skies And in the construction of the earth are ayat, instructing signs. And then he says, and in you, meaning us humans, there are also instructing signs, but Allah comes behind that to say that most of us are not paying attention. Most of us have no clue that this is not just, marks of beauty in the universe and nice sunrise, beautiful sunset, the glowing moon, full moon, half moon, quarter moon, and all of those things are aesthetically beautiful. They're just qualified aesthetically for us to just sit and look at and marvel at and seek the beauty from. But that's not the main intention of the things that Allah created as ayat. The primary purpose of those creations is to provide information to the intellect as an instructing sign, instructing us on how to personally, individually qualify for Allah's grace, for Allah's mercy, and eventually, inshallah, for Allah's paradise. But you have to, if you're trying to get to a particular destiny and somebody hands you a set of directions or instructions and you say, I don't need this, I'll guess my best how to get to paradise. Yeah, I'll do some Swami stuff and some yoga stuff. And, I guess if I do a little bit of everybody's religion, that should put me in paradise. That's what you think. That's not how this thing goes, partner. You have to follow specific guidance that has been proven to be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we know when it's proven to be from Allah? Because it's going to follow that fitra pattern I was telling you about. You can check it by its corresponding information that Allah has placed in nature herself. Allah says that he created human beings to grow in the same manner that plants grow. Well, now our job is to go study the plant. How many people are doing that outside of the people studying biology as a course? Our ancestors used to do that. Our grandmothers and even grandfathers used to study plants just as a matter of life. They understood it was beautiful to watch a flower bed, but they understood that it was more useful to study how those flowers were doing what they are doing in that flower bed. So you have your George Washington Carvers within the history of the African American sojourn in this part of the country. He was a former slave, they say, who took a real interest in botany, the study of plant life, the study of seeds. And he said that he used to get up at 4 o'clock every morning and he would go out and talk to the flowers in his flower garden. And he said, and the plants, he said, the plants and the flowers spoke back. Those are the words of George Washington Carver. You need to look him up and study him. He's the reason why you have your Skippy and Jif and Peter Pan peanut butter in your cabinet. He invented those things, peanut butter, but they always give the credit to somebody else when you're not in a position to establish yourself. And he, I think, also created about 120, 130 at least other inventions just from studying the peanut. Just the peanut. So these are mostly our unsung heroes in history that we're not paying attention to because, as Allah says in the Quran, most people are not paying attention to the instructions that are all around them and in them. Let's continue. So the female is the one who is entered by the male. She's untha, the one we enter. He is dhakr, the one who protrudes forward. In fact, the now profane word dick as a member of the male apparatus, sexual apparatus, it comes from the word dhikr. They just took off the motivating rotor R that we were discussing. They just chopped it off, no pun intended, again, especially in light of today's weird science. They chopped the R off of dhikr and they just gave it to us as dick Fun with Dick and Jane. You remember those books. And you also know that in the English language, Dick is also a shortened form of detective, the word detective. We had a cartoon that was very popular when I was a child called Dick Tracy. He was a detective because they know that that part of the male apparatus is detecting. It's detecting the fluid that it spews out. It has the job now of detecting where that ovum is, where that egg is. It's swimming through all kinds of fluids, trying to make it to the ovum for fertilization purposes. So these words don't begin as cuss words, cursing words. They devolve into cuss words and abusive language. Because remember, Iblis's job, as I'll mention again in a moment, is to corrupt language, is to corrupt the language. And it seems as though they spent the most time corrupting that language, that if it wasn't corrupt, if they didn't turn it into a cuss word, there would be multitudes of gems of wisdom in those words. You know, in Arabic, there's a word called a fakka, which again devolved into the cuss word that I'm not even going to pronounce right now. You know what it is. But the Arabic word is fakka. You can guess the rest of it, the connections to the English word. Do you know that it's only been a few hundred years since the word, pardon me if you're any little children listening, but since the word shit became a bad word in the English language? When it was first concocted as a word in the English language, it had nothing to do with anything, that would curse somebody or be what they call a bad word in the language. It actually comes from the Arabic word Shiite, which just means to separate. That's what it means in the Quran. Allah says, do not divide yourselves into Shiite. I don't know how these people in history of the Muslims came to call themselves Shiites when Allah says very clearly in the Quran, do not divide yourselves into Shiite. It just means into sections, because Allah says if you do that, you're going to lose your power. When you disconnect things, you disconnect the plug from your wall, you're going to lose the power. Yeah. So it's the same thing that Allah is telling us about. So that wasn't originally a bad. I'm not saying go back to using it. No, you'd sound foolish in 2024, just using those words as common words, although the society has grown to do exactly that. They've introduced a bunch of so-called cuss words through the comedians of this world. They did it on purpose so that you wouldn't have any kind of mental discrepancy towards using words that your subconscious mind is telling you are bad, bad words, but I'm going to use it anyway because I'm a bad, bad man. And some of the females are badder than some of the baddest men walking the planet because they just take carte blanche at using words that should not be used around children or in public. But this is a shaitan again, manipulating grammar. So this is the division that Allah created, but it's a division that was intended to reassemble or come back together to reunite in order to produce three and more, the male and the female. And in the 46th ayat, now remember there are 46 chromosomes in your human body, male and female. 23 chromosomes for the male, 23 chromosomes for the female. Allah says, min nutfatin idha tumna, from a seed, listen, you Nunetics students, from a seed when lodged, and then they put in brackets, in its place, that would be the womb. So he created this male and female phenomenon in biology and in other sciences, physical and metaphysical sciences. He created them all from what's called the nutfa. Now, nutfa is generally translated to mean sperm. But what's not being said by the Muslim scholars, maybe they don't know to say it, is that nutfa, although it's coming from the male body, it contains masculine and feminine properties. Masculine and feminine properties. You should know that if you're a student of Nunetics, seed letters. Within those seed letters are the potential for both masculine and feminine concepts, ideas, conversations about. So let's say it, these few words about human embryonic development. And the embryo is the first manifestation of life form once the sperm and the ovum are in contact with each other. This is from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Human embryonic development, or human embryogenesis, is the development and formation of the human embryo. It is characterized by the processes of cell division and cellular differentiation of the embryo that occurs during the early stages of development. In biological terms, the development of the human body entails growth from a one-celled zygote, Z-Y-G-O-T-E, to an adult human being. And I told you in previous classes that the English word zygote is an offshoot of the Quranic Arabic word zawjain, which means pairs, zawjain, masculine and feminine coming together, pairing up, and that's what a zygote is. So it entails growth from a one-celled zygote to an adult human being. Fertilization occurs when the sperm cell successfully enters untha and fuses with an egg cell called ovum. The genetic material of the sperm and egg then combine to form the single-cell zygote, and the germinal stage of development commences or begins. Human embryonic development covers the first 8 weeks of development. Listen to this next part carefully, which have 23 stages. We just got finished talking about the 23 in relation to the chromosomes. In both the male and the female, 23 each, totaling 46. Human embryonic development, I repeat, covers the first 8 weeks of development, which have 23 stages, called the Carnegie stages. At the beginning of the 9th week, the embryo is termed a fetus, spelled F-O-E-T-U-S in some cases in British English. In comparison to the embryo, the fetus has more recognizable external features and a more complete set of developing organs. The number of the ayah discussing this is also 46. We started out with 45, but this particular ayat is 46 from a seed when lodged in its place. Now we're going to talk about exotic nuclei and atomic masses. Remember now, our subject is the cosmic Qur'an and cosmic DNA. And they say here that proceedings of the Third International Conference on Exotic Nuclei and Atomic Masses, it's nicknamed ENAM, E-N-A-M, 2001. That was the year that they convened. And it was in this city in Finland. Don't try to get me to pronounce it. Hämeenlinna. Hämeen, really? It's the name of a sir, isn't it? In Finland. And that happened from the 2nd to the 7th of July in 2001. Now, this scientific discovery relates to the atoms. Pardon me. This scientific discovery related to the atoms was first published in 1995. And hence, the first conference was called Exotic Nuclei of Atomic Masses, or, again, ENAM, E-N-A-M 95. It so happens that the 6th surah of the Quran is entitled El-An'am. This conference was happenstantially called Inam. And because it was first published in 1995, they put 95 after Inam. Who knew? This surah that's called El Anam, take the al off, it just is a definite article meaning the. Anam sounds very suspiciously close to Inam. I don't know whether they did that on purpose. I don't know whether they had it in 1995 to correspond with certain ayat in the Quran. I don't know. But let's take a look at the 95th ayah in Surah Al-An'am, which is the 6th surah. It reads, "It is Allah who causes the seed grain and the date stone to split and sprout." You Nunetics students, I hope you're listening carefully. Continuing. He causes the living to issue from the dead, and he is the one to cause the dead to issue from the living. That is Allah. Then how are you deluded away from the truth? This is Allah asking humanity. How are you not understanding how this whole thing goes based on its construction? Coming into these explosions of information throughout history that are continuously upgrading our scientific knowledge of how creation functions. And we look at all of this and we're not understanding that it's containing instructing signs for our conscious evaluation and evolution. Just the fact that your fingernails grow out of your fingers is proof that Allah brings forth the dead from the living. Your fingernails are dead matter. Dead matter. You don't believe it? Get yourself a fingernail clipper and clip them off. See if you die. See if you bleed. You won't even bleed from clipping your nails. Your hair is essentially dead matter. Clip your hair, cut your hair, go get a haircut. Go get a new style of hairdo where they have to cut some of the hair. There's no pain because the hair is essentially or theoretically dead. It'd fall on the ground, you can step on it, you won't feel no way about it. You sweep it up, throw it in the garbage, you don't feel no way about it. That's the dead coming forth from the living. And there's plenty of scientific proof to back up this ayah. The Quranic Arabic word hubbun may be translated as seeds. It can be translated as nuclei. It can even be translated as what science calls particles. They talk about the wave particle theory. Particles. Every human being with human vision can see a seed, but every human being with human vision can't necessarily peek into the nuclei of a living thing. And definitely not with the human eye can you view a particle. You need a stronger magnifying glass, looking glass for that. So we're talking today about the cosmic Qur'an and cosmic DNA. So let's look at this word cosmic. It's from the smaller word cosm, C-O-S-M, C pronounced as a K. And you know the C and the K with those K sounds is also interchangeable in Nunetics with the Q sound, Ka. There's the K sound in Arabic, Kaf, K-A-F, and there's the Q sound in Arabic, Qaf, Q-A-F, and they are interchangeable. So Qasam is nunetically interchangeable with Qasam. And let's look at what these three letters mean in the Arabic language. They're from the letters Qaf, Sin, Mim, Qasam. It means to divide, dispose, separate, apportion, distribute. Qasamun, it also means oath. So when Allah takes an oath in the Quran by saying uqsimu, and then whatever comes after that, it means he's taking an oath, so to speak, upon the reality of that piece of creation he's about to tell you about. And Allah swears by many different parts of his creation. You know why? When you put somebody under oath, they're promising to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You get it? That's what you say to the judge. I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but. And there's no human creature, unless he is absolutely dedicated to telling the truth, who's going to actually follow that habit or that pattern of just being totally truthful at all times. But guess what is totally truthful at all times? The rest of Allah's creation. The sun cannot lie to you about what it does, about its value, about its impact upon the earth. The sun cannot lie about that. The air you're breathing does what Allah assigned for it to do without deviation. They're angels of Allah, and they follow Allah's every command, as he says in the Quran. So stop seeing angels as, some cloud formation with wings sticking out that every now and then somebody takes a picture of and say, I saw an angel in the sky. Yeah, I see a lot of things in the clouds. A lot of things. When I was younger, boy, we used to sit out on the porch and just look up at the clouds. And we said, oh, look at that one. It looks like the people who say there was a man in the moon who was smiling. You remember all of that? And that's what we thought we were seeing. But the larger message is that all of creation is communicating with us as ayat, instructions. And the instructions that Allah is sending to the human intellect and to the human heart, but mostly the human intellect, they don't lie. They are perfectly truthful. They are sadiq. They follow the sadiq principle. So that's why Allah can so-called swear by them. He can take an oath by them. He knows once he puts them on the witness stand in defense of his truth, they will never lie. Makes sense? All right. So we can get past the rest of this. You'll see it in your notes. The cosmos is accurately proportioned into 12 sections known as the zodiac. Now we're into the zodiacal sciences. Each signature, or as they call them, signs in the zodiac, exhibits frequencies which affect the life forms within its immediate environment. The universe is the macro, the bigger cosmos. Our body and what's contained within it, all of the way down to the subparticle cells, atoms, subatomic atoms, and all of that represents the microcosm. So the universe itself is just the bigger picture of what's taking place in you as a body. Your body itself is a universe. You have planets swimming around in the core of your body called organs that correspond with the major, well-known 7 planets in the universe or in our immediate cosmic reality. So you got Mars, Venus, Mercury, all of that operating within your body. And also within the frequency signatures of your chakra. They call them chakras in India. But they're just energies, differentiated energies. So this word microcosm has to do with a community. See, your community is a microcosm. It's a place or situation regarded as encapsulating in miniature the characteristic qualities or features of something much larger. The humankind, that means all of humanity, regarded as the epitome of the universe. So all of us together as human beings represent a universe. Imam Muhammad taught a lecture called Man and the Universe, meaning mind. and how the mind operates within the context of Allah's universe. The belief in correspondences between the universe and man, between microcosm and macrocosm. The splitting of Adam in the Bible, Genesis, says God opened up his chest and took a rib out to create Eve. That's the splitting of Adam, Adam, in order to create Eve. Well, that is simply symbolic as a representation of the splitting of the atom that science tells us about, as an act of biological fission in order to release electrons. So Adam, in this particular instance, is a symbolic representation of what science calls the atom. You know, T and D are interchangeable in linguistics. And it is an act of biological fission, the opposite of that being fusion. When you bring things together, fission is when you split things apart. And when you split the atom apart, out comes electrons. So electrons are representative of Eve. You see, people of old, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, and beyond years ago, they had this scientific knowledge. See, that's what's kind of throwing people off in our day and time. We think this generation of earthlings is the smartest that has ever been on earth, and that's not true. There are people, Allah tells us that in the Quran, there were people who were before you, who were buried beneath the ground, who did things and knew things that were way beyond what so-called modern day man knows and has achieved. You have pictures of a lot of those achievements on the walls of ancient Kemet, now called Egypt. They have spaceships on the walls of ancient Kemet. Spaceships, light bulbs, they have all of these things, and some things that they had flying ships. We call ours airplanes. Theirs were actually spacecraft. Well, how did they know about these things? They performed ancient surgeries and all kinds of things that were successful. How did they know about it? So the modern day human, we have an advantage in terms of evolution, mostly on the internal level, the spiritual level, and even the emotional level. You can be much more emotionally evolved than people were 1,000 years ago, or 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, if you're paying attention to the ayat. If you're not paying attention to the ayat, then most of humanity will represent a devolution. That's the opposite direction of the evolution. Is evolution getting increasingly more valuable, let's say that, more valuable. See, evolve, that word is related to value. Evolve, value, you see it in there. So the more you have an increase of things that are increasing your internal properties, that will allow you to do things on this earth that will benefit more than just you and your children and wife or husband, or more than just your block, or more than just the people in your immediate community. The human being was created in order to supervise over established communities of people, some of whom may have nothing to do with him or her genetically or racially or any other kind of way that we see as being physical or chemical or biological. The human mind has been created by Allah to be able to grow and evolve and extend so that every creature on the back of the earth might benefit, human and non-human. Animals are better today. They're better off today than they were 500 years ago. Trust me when I tell you that. You knitting all kind of booties for your dog. People got their dogs in sweaters, and your cat is sleeping indoors, next to a puffy pillow. Don't tell me these animals are not doing better than us. The only exception I would say to that are the birds that people still think they have a right to lock up in a cage, when their nature is to fly. But many of those ones that are locked up in the cage Humans taught them how to mimic the human voice. And they talk back to you like they know what they're talking about. And it's beyond Polly want a cracker. I mean, these birds are really, really saying some things that humans sometimes are not smart enough to put together. So this evolutionary quality is actually taking place all over the planet. All over the planet. So what is this fission in terms of biology? Fission in biology is the division of a single entity into two or more parts and the regeneration of those parts to separate, to separate entities resembling the original. Got it? Fission is going to split a thing into divisions. It's going to split that one entity, that single entity, into two or more parts, and then it's going to regenerate those parts into separate and distinct entities, but they're going to be resembling the original. The object experiencing fission is usually a cell, but the term may also refer to how organisms, bodies, populations, or species split into discrete parts. The fission may be binary, bi means two, binary fission, in which a single organism produces two parts, or it can be multiple fission, in which a single entity produces multiple parts. Now keep your consonantal connections brain in operation, because when you see the word cell, we've discussed this many, many, many times within this past year alone. Start making the consonantal connections in your English brain between cell and soul. You hear those consonants connecting? The C in cell is an S sound. So cell and soul are going to be bringing you similar meanings. So that means that just as your physical, biological cell can experience fission, division, separation, and then replication, the same process can take place within the human soul. You've heard people say, probably even about your children and grandchildren, say, man, he's just like his grandfather. You know that your children very often, or sometimes it'll skip a generation and it'll show up in your grandchildren that they eat. Their eating mannerisms are the same as their grandmother, or the way they position their face when they see something they don't like, you know, the way they scrounge their face. I mean, he said, man, you look just like your grandmother when you do that. Stop doing that. But the grandmother didn't teach that to them. Genetics taught that to them. We're talking about the cosmic Quran and cosmic DNA. In the 4th surah, first ayah, look at what Allah says. Ya ayyuhal nasu. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيب. O humans, have taqwa for your Lord, meaning Rabb, who created you from a single person. See, this is talking about the phenomenon that we just discussed in science. Created you from a single person, created of like nature, his mate, and from them twain or two, scattered, again, like seeds, countless men and women. Have taqwa for Allah, through whom you demand your mutable rights and reverence the wombs that bore you, for Allah ever watches over you. Beautiful when you grow to understand it. Allah is speaking to humanity, asking us or commanding us actually, or advising us, you might say, informing us that we should have taqwa for our Rabb, because he is the one who created us from a single nafs or a single person. And we're going to focus for a minute on the word for created, which is khalaqa. Kum means all of you. Khalaqa. A program contains a specific mode of communication. We also call them instructions. Allah told you that in you also are ayat, instructing signs. The Quranic Arabic word khalaq, transliterated Khalaq, speaks to this phenomenon in nature. It alludes to the idea that everything within the natural world includes its own unique codex, which means book of instructions. Everything in the natural world includes its own unique book of instructions. How about that? That's what we are calling a program. Look at these words carefully. Even if you've known them for 1,000 years, take another look when they come through the portal of Nunetics. Look at this word, khalaq. It doesn't only mean that he created a thing. They speak of it every time they say Allah created this, Allah created that. They use the word khalaq. He uses the word khalaq, and they say, oh, that means to create. But that's not all it means. There are other words in the Quran that more specifically mean create, especially from nothing. El-Bari is the creator from nothing. There's nothing here yet. With khalaq, it doesn't mean that it's created from no thing or from nothing. It means that it has been created and then programmed. So khalaq, once again, means he programmed a thing. So let's go back to that ayat. O mankind, reverence your guardian Lord who created you. Now you can add the meanings of who programmed you. Your Rabb is the one who programmed you from a single nafs or person or soul. See how beautiful this is when you know how to translate? So let's look at this nunetically. The Arabic letter kha with the KH sound, kha, like you got something stuck in your throat that you're trying to get loose or you're trying to have released. Kha is the first sound in the word khalaq. And kha, check your Nunetics book, represents the seizing and detaining of something. To see, you know how the popo do when they're running after a perp and they grab them and they throw them down on the ground and they don't put your hands behind your back and they cuff them and, book them down, or, that kind of seizing and detaining. That's indicative of the letter kha. Kha. Because when you do that to a person, very often you'll see them trying to get away. They're trying to get away before you actually seize them. Once you seize them, they might still be trying to wiggle out of the cuffs, wiggle away from the police, not get in the police van. I'm talking about those who are guilty. That's kha. They want to be released. But what's the rest of this saying? So kha is the seizing and detaining of something. That something is in the letter that follows kha, which is the letter lam, the L sound, lam, this letter right here. So it's the seizing and detaining kha of lam, and lam represents communication. But that communication is coming from somewhere. Where is it coming from? That's told to us in the letter Qaf. I'm going to show you how beautiful the Nunetics method is. So it's the seizing and detaining of communication. Lam represents the human tongue, coming from Qaf. And what is Qaf? Check your Nunetics manual. It's representative of the subconscious mind, the mind in the back, the subconscious mind. So what is this saying, instructor? The seizing and detaining of communication from the subconscious mind? Yes, your subconscious mind is communicating with you 24/7. It's the conscious mind that goes to sleep at night when you lay down and go to bed. But the subconscious mind, it never sleeps. It never slumbers. It is always searching for meaning, for how to apply information that you're feeding to the conscious mind for assimilation. That's your subconscious mind. You know, when Allah says in the Quran that He, about Himself, that He never sleeps nor slumbers, well, that's also true for how He created your subconscious mind. He created your subconscious mind to never sleep or slumber. But you are not always conscious of how the subconscious mind is operating within you. Very often, the things that we say, I would venture to say maybe 85% of the things that we say on a daily basis are coming from the subconscious, not from you consciously thinking about what to say. If it were coming from what you consciously entertain as thoughts and ideas, you'd be able to remember everything you said that day because you were thinking about it. But it's not coming from there. All of the words coming out of your mouth are already or have already been assimilated in the subconscious part of the mind. You would know how to speak if your subconscious mind had not learned language. If your subconscious mind had not already learned the alphabet of that particular language you're speaking and the sounds that are involved in pronouncing those, all of that information has already been captured and processed within that bank that we call the memory bank. And when you speak, you simply go to the bank and make a withdrawal. I need to spend this today. And whatever you don't need to spend or whatever additional funds you get, you put that in the bank. So we're constantly learning and depositing that information into the mind, which then seeps into the mind below the conscious mind, called the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is the bank of information that's holding on to all of the things that you have been allowed to memorize. How wonderful is that? But if you were to have to remember those things consciously, you'd go crazy. All of the things that you learned since you were able to learn, and you had to keep that floating in your conscious mind, you wouldn't get anything done. How would you get something done? And you're constantly thinking about memories of things you already learned or things you already did or participated in. You'd get no rest, no sleep. Continuing, every word which is uttered by the mouth is based on information that has been, listen to this word, clocked, clocked, khalaqad, clock, khalaq. You hear the consonantal connections? I'll let you go to work on that. That information, I repeat, has been clocked, downloaded, created and downloaded into the subconscious mind. It has been programmed, just like your clock is programmed, to hours, minutes, and seconds. Your clock is the number one program on your wrist, on your wall, on top of your dresser, your watch, your clock, whatever other kind of timepiece that you have in your car. Your car can tell you the time. Those things are creations, yes, absolutely, but they are programs. In this case, We're talking about the program that has been instituted within the subconscious region of the human mind. Both the unconscious mind and subconscious minds contain programs. The unconscious mind is genetically regulated. Don't worry about remembering all of this as I'm saying it. You might write down keywords. The purpose of my classes is for you to, once the video comes out, that's when the real study takes place on your part. Right now, I'm just familiarizing you with new terms, new ways of expressing knowledge. So the unconscious mind is genetically programmed or regulated, while the subconscious mind is mimetically controlled. A meme, which is where the word mimetic or mimetic is from, the smaller word meme, just like the Arabic letter meme, sounds exactly the same. A meme operates on the cultural level, the level of things happening in your environment. And it does so in the exact same way that a gene operates on the biological level. So if you want to know truly and officially what a meme is and does, you have to study what the gene is and does. And the gene is what we're discussing today as DNA. So following that logic, knowing that there is a biological, a physical, a chemical gene that is operating, or set of genes that are operating inside of your body, then you should also know that since Allah created everything Zawjain in pairs, that there must be a cultural gene. There must be something as cultural and cosmic genes or DNA operating in you. And how are they operating, Instructor Bilal? In the same exact way as your biological genes operate. So you got to study Allah wouldn't give you something to study that you couldn't reach, that you could not investigate, and you don't know who has $1 trillion to keep going into space and studying what the cosmos is when the cosmos is right around you. I told you before, the cosmos literally begins at arm's length of you, right about the length of your aura and torus field energies. Everything outside of that represents the cosmos. So it's not all of the way up there when we say cosmos. We're talking about the environment that exists within arm's length of you and all of the way around you, stretched out into the universe, into the areas of other planetary bodies, into the stars, and all of that represents the cosmos, the galaxy, and then the broader universe. But it begins right here where you are. So repeating this important fact, the unconscious mind is genetically regulated. When we say unconscious mind, we're talking about the mind that is regulated by your fight or flight mechanism in the brain. Not the subconscious, the unconscious. These are activities that are being governed over by Allah, to the point where you do not have to take conscious control over those things that your unconscious mind has control over. Your unconscious mind even tells you when you got to go to the bathroom. If you had to decide, you'd never let that happen during in the middle of an important meeting. Oh, excuse me. You never let, it's too embarrassing. You tell your body, if you could consciously control that, you can consciously control it to a degree. You're holding there, you squeezing cheeks and all of that. But that ain't enough. Eventually, because it's biologically, chemically programmed into you, you're going to have to give in to that urge. And that's what we're talking about now. Urges in the biology are being controlled by the unconscious mind. And your genes, your DNA is what is dictating that activity. While the subconscious mind is mimetically controlled. It's controlled by memes. And once again, A meme is operating on the cultural level, the environmental level, and it does so in the exact same way that a gene operates on the biological level. Let's take a look at this word meme. A meme is an idea, behavior, or style that spreads by means of imitation from person to person, just like genes do. When you impregnate a woman, mister, your genes are being replicated. Sometimes your blood type is you know these things about biology, right? So, but a meme is when that happens from person to person within a culture and often carries symbolic meaning representing a particular phenomenon or theme. Imam Muhammad spoke of this also as the group soul. The group soul, by virtue of us being in mimetic contact with each other, we start to share similar cultural behaviors, cultural ideas, ideas about what tastes good, because all of us eat this particular food. This is the food that we caught because it's in our region of the country or city or world or whatever. You know, we got a bunch of chickens around us. We learned to love chicken. Sometimes fried chicken. A lot of people will grow to love fish and seafood because they live right by the seashore, and that's what they had access to. So that has nothing to do with, you know, your closeness to God or anything like that. It has to do with your closeness to things in your cultural environment. People like to laugh and joke and do slapstick and all of that. Well, you grow up acting like a clown. Interestingly enough, in the past, I'd say at least the past 50 years, the past 5 straight decades, they have inundated the African American community with comedian after comedian. They became our social and cultural heroes. Richard Pryor, beginning with Red Fox, Richard Pryor, you know, Flip Wilson. He wasn't so much on the vulgar sides of things, but a lot of the vulgar ones, they've been rapid firing those comedians into the African American, the so-called African American community. And for a reason, because they wanted the people, they wanted the group soul to become affected and infected by clown behavior. That's why. Clown behavior. Keep these things in mind as we continue. So that's a meme. Supporters of the concept regard memes as cultural analogs to genes in that they self-replicate, they mutate, and respond to selective pressures. So when you're under the awesome impact of memes, I could literally say about you that you are a mutation. You're not a true human if you're not following true human programs and values. If you're just following something, you know, we have a lot of young people, especially since the whole so-called hip hop phenomenon started. We have a whole lot of young people who never actually spoke with their true voice, the true voice that Allah gave them. Because when they were young, infants and toddlers, their parents and others exposed them to the way words were being pronounced by hip hop artists. Yo, see what I'm saying, man? You know, I mean, I'm just saying, man, you know, and from, you know, 8, 9, and that's the last time they heard their real voices. Mommy, can I go outside? That's the real voice right there. Yo, man, won't you come on out with me, man? We come back to the crib later, man, and get us some, you know, whatever, you know, and that's slurring the words and the enunciations and pronunciations. That's not a real language. That's the manipulation of a language that I keep telling you about that was instituted by the Iblesian ideology of grammar manipulation. Let's continue. So, you know, we've been speaking forever about the three-parted brain. The first brain being the lizard brain or the reptilian brain, it's called. And that's from the brain stem and the cerebellum. This is the brain stem, the red, and branching to the left is the cerebellum. where long-term emotion takes place. Long-term emotion, genetic memory, if you will. Things that you can remember that can be pulled out of your genetic makeup that stretches back to even before you were born as a physical biology on this earth. Too big a subject to get into right now. But it is in charge of autopilot, meaning automatic behavior, and fight and flight behavior. If I think I can beat it and it poses a threat to me, I'm gonna stomp it into the ground. But if I feel like I'm not going to be able to beat it, then I got to flee. I got to take flight. And all of this happens within milliseconds of time in the brain. There's no time to dhakr about it. There's no time to think. There's no time to remember what you did the last time this happened. No, somebody's got a pistol in your face. You got to make what they call a split-second decision. That's not your regular brain that's doing that. That's your lizard brain that's doing that, because the genes, the DNA has been designed for survival also, first and foremost. If you don't survive, what's the use in having an emotional and a rational brain if you're not going to be able to use it because you're thinking too long about what to do about this emergency? And let me tell you something, that one of you one day will have enough time on your hands or think it important enough to do this research. I've already begun. Maybe one of the smaller groups that we break down into, one of those 5 groups, can dedicate themselves to what I'm about to give you as an assignment. This assignment has not been done, to my knowledge, anywhere within the Muslim world. And that is, here's my hypothesis. I'll call it that so people won't argue with me. But I know it's real. Every statement in the Quran is related to one or more of these 3 areas of brain activity. You know, even when Allah says to give a certain kind of person a level of punishment, Allah says in one case, and do not let your hearts swerve you away or sway you away from justice. Be just. Do not let your emotions, your hearts, cause you to swerve away, to ignore justice. That's wonderful. It's speaking to the idea of justice being something automatic that will not be curtailed because of how you feel. It will not be curtailed, as Allah says in another part of the Quran, be just even if it's against yourselves, your nearest of kin. You know the verse. Be just. It is the nearest to piety or taqwa. Huh? So what is Allah saying? You got to follow automatic command based on what Allah told you should automatically happen in that instance. And don't let your emotions get in the way. And I'm telling you, from Al-Fatiha to An-Nas, you can group each ayat into a category where you're going to see that one or more of these 3 levels of the brain is in action. And I would add the 4th part of the brain called the pineal gland that is connecting you to cosmic thought. That's in there too. Allah says, whatever is in the skies and whatever is in the earth does obey Allah, etc. But in another place, he says, whosoever is in the skies, man fi samawat, wal man fi al-ard, whoever. He didn't say al al-ard, on the earth. He said fi al-ard, in the earth. And we know that there are living beings, living creatures in the earth. We know every time you see an ant, you're looking at a being that is a subterraneous life form. In most cases, they live beneath the earth, many of them. Other creatures live in caves and all of that. But it still said fee, and we don't know how far that fee goes until we start digging, do we? Some people say there are cities buried beneath the earth's structure. And that's also logic that's given to us in the Quran. Allah said that there are many towns and civilizations that were here way before you that are now buried beneath the earth. And you have not heard a peep out of them. It doesn't mean that they're not living. It just means you haven't heard from them. They haven't sent you the memo. Many things have happened on this planet in the many millions, maybe billions of years that this planet has been here before human life showed up. And we don't know what their stories are. We don't know how they got here. Allah tells us very clearly that there are even elements that were not here on earth that Allah revealed to the earth. One of those is iron. We'll talk about that later. Won't have time to talk about it today. It's in my notes, but it'll wait until the next time we meet. Just wanted to get this initial information in. So that's that lizard brain. And then you have the mammal brain, which is controlling emotions, but those are not long-term emotions. Those are the things you feel and then dismiss. You get angry and you make up, that kind of thing. That's happening in the limbic system of the brain. The habits that you form that become somewhat automatic, but you can change those habits. You cannot change your instinctive motivations and your instinctive drives. You can say all you want that I'm not going to eat. I'm going to be like Mahatma Gandhi. I ain't eating for 30 days. Your automatic brain will go into overdrive, convincing you that you better eat or die. That's coming from the lizard brain. But habits, you can deal with a 30-day, serving of Ramadan. People do it all over the world, even if they're not Muslims. In India, places in Africa, they fast, sometimes 10 days or whatever, but they fast because it's developed in them as a habit, as an attachment. So there are things that we attach ourselves to that we can become detached from. There are emotions that we experience that we no longer choose to emote. There are memories that we have within us that might be negative that we now have dismissed, and we only want to focus on the positive memories. So this is, this is not set in stone. This is the lizard brain. That's set in stone. Then the crowning achievement among these three is called the neocortex. Neo just means new. And it's the newest part of the human brain that was able to develop language, abstract thought, imagination, consciousness, reasoning, rationalizing. These are important points that you need to study word for word. Imagination is actually the first mind that the human being comes into after birth and starts to see things that it never saw in the womb. Eyes weren't even open mostly in the womb. And when it gets here, everything is fuzzy wuzzy. Everything is not clear except for the mother who's right in his face. And the more sound you hear coming from the mimetic, you see how the memes kick in as soon as you're born? The more sounds and sights that you see once you enter this mimetic environment, then the memes begin to pass on information to you in the same way that your biological genes are passing on information to you. That's why you got your daddy's face on your face. You got his nose on your face. Sometimes your Uncle Willie's mouth, his lips, the shape of his lips. Say, where'd that boy get them lips? Oh, that's Uncle Willie for sure. Look, put them together. Look, Willie, baby, Willie, baby. They got the same lips. Sometimes the same hands, sometimes the same toes. We don't pay attention to these things. Sometimes we got a great big old toe on our feet that mama or daddy doesn't have on their feet, but auntie's got that big toe on her foot. These are genetic communications in the body. And it's the same thing with the mimetic communications. Sometimes you can be as patient as I don't know what, and nobody know where you got it because your mama and your daddy are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs when it comes to being patient. They don't know how to be patient. But your grandmother, oh my goodness, is she a patient one? So you can inherit the proclivity for patience or for intelligence. As William mentioned in the beginning, look at Elijah Muhammad. He barely completed the 3rd grade in the South back in the turn of the 20th century. He went to school in the late 1800s. That's when he was going, and into, that's when he was going to school. 1st grade, 2nd grade, you know what kind of education that was, especially for people who look like he looked. Well, so how did he become so smart? And by the time he passed, he had about 300,000 people in his nation of Islam. What made him that smart? It was information that was deposited within his DNA for sure, but it was combined with information that was being taught to him, if you will, from the mimetic environment, the mimetic environment, things that he was seeing and experiencing as a member of that particular ethnic group during that particular time. Those were also ayat instructing signs. The word program contains the suffix gram. Remember that Iblis promised to attack the human being through subversive, look at that word, subverse, subverses, sub beneath. Beneath what? The verse. There's something lurking beneath the verse that they're teaching you, that they're giving you, that they're showing you, that is actually operating as a subversive tactic to take your mind somewhere other than where the fitra designed for it to go. So these are subversive means and measures. That's Iblis's scheme. Iblis is not some individual little fireball guy existing, 10,000 years ago, or whatever they're trying to tell you, some of these schools and masjids. That's not what Iblis is. Iblis is a forever creature that is operating within the context of Allah's fitrah. He's not activated by it. He's not influenced by the fitrah necessarily. He's your muscle builder for what you need to do in the fitrah. And he operates in the mimetic environment, but there's also a genetic connection with Iblis. We won't talk about that today. We're talking today about the environmental influence of Iblis, right? And his specialty in the mimetic environment is in causing language to become languid. The word languid and language are related words. Look them up. Languid means weak and eventually of no account. That's what they've done to language. That's why we say any old thing to almost any old person, and it don't even mean anything anymore to us. It used to mean something that we would talk and curse in front of elders on the bus. Why are you saying that to somebody's grandmother standing? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry. You don't even know who this lady is. But now you cuss and fuss in front of elders who you know. That's your grandmother. How you talking like that in front of your grandmother? I don't give a shit. Your grandmother, she hear me talking like this all the time. Well, where'd you learn that? From Iblis, the manipulator of language until it becomes languid, weak, and of no account. That's his specialty, causing language to become weak. The word nigga, N-I-G-G-A, stems from the ancient Abyssinian, that means Ethiopian, word naga, N-A-G-A, naga, which means king or ruler. In the Greek language, they pronounced it as nagos. You've heard that word in relation to the followers of our Prophet Muhammad who had to leave Arabia and go into Abyssinia for protection against those wild Arabs, those pagan Arabs who were oppressing them. So they went among the ancient Abyssinians for protection to plead their case, so to speak. And the king said, the difference between us and you, and they were Christians, the difference between us and you is the difference of this line I've just drawn in the sand with my stick. You can stay here for as long as you want. No harm will come to you. That's what the Nagas were all about. And that's how they portrayed their leadership. But look at what the word nigger has now come to mean. That's what we mean by the manipulation by Iblis of grammar, meanings for words. And there are thousands of those examples. Now look in the online etymology dictionary for what gram is. Without going through all of it, it's dealing with weight, a small weight. And a special use of the classical word, meaning a letter of the alphabet. Second meaning, it's a noun word forming element, meaning that which is written or marked. So every time you write letters and words, you're dealing with gram, that which is drawn, a picture, a drawing, that which is written, a character, an alphabet letter, written letter, piece of writing. You get it, connected to letters.
Instructor,
Yes,
we have about 7 minutes to go.
yes, sir. Thank you very much. Perfect timing. Thank you. All right. Grammar, rules of Latin. And I've shown you this before, so I don't have to dwell on it. That it also means magic, incantation, spells. That's why they call the first lessons you get in grade school spelling. Not spelling like you know spelling, just putting letters together. They put these letters together and the sounds of these words together to have a particular level of impact upon your human brain, your human intellect, your human emotions, and also your automatic brain, fight or flight brain. They control the human mind by appealing to these different levels of grammar, or through grammar, appealing to these different levels of the brain, I should say. And I told you grammar and glamour are essentially the same word. So they do the same thing through things that they glamorize. They glamorized crime in America. They glamorized drugs. First official proof of that I found as a high schooler was when they put out the movie Superfly, a coke dealing pimp in Harlem who beat the popo, the Mac. Those of you who are my age, you know these movies. Glorified pimps, glamorized pimps, glamorized hoes, excuse the expression, prostitutes. Foxy Brown, dressed like the average prostitute. What they call hot pants at the time in the 70s. James Brown popularized it through a whole song, Hot Pants. You got to use what you got to get just what you want. So a whole, oh boy, a whole subcategory of people in America bit the bullet, bit into that fallacy meaning for those words. And the things that, what did the song say? Everything good is bad and everything bad is good. They just flip the script literally on us through the manipulation of words in our music. And of course, it's associated with Hollywood, high fashion, celebrity, that word glamour. Diana Ross, you know, those characters. So we're going to stop there and pick up on this iRobot picture. The next time that we meet, it could be before next Sunday. We'll let you know. but I hope everyone has learned a little something from what we've exposed you to thus far in today's class. Everyone enjoy the lesson for today. You can open up your phone if you need to. Don't run into each other. Don't make a whole lot of noise. Just let us know that you were paying attention.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we
Yes, sir.
did.
Yes.
All right. Very good.
Alhamdulillah.
Very good.
Alhamdulillah. Outstanding.
We thank Allah.
Absolutely superb.
We thank Allah.
Goodness
So
is on the rise.
if you study today's discourse, maybe we can open up next week with maybe 10 minutes worth of comments from you on what you're learning thus far in this particular discourse under this particular headline. I need to start hearing from you and to see whether or not you're keeping up with the velocity of information that I'm sharing with you. If not, then I'll slow down. I'll slow way down. But I think you're picking up on it just from our conversations in
Imam,
between time. Yes, sir.
have you been consulting with some neurophysics or some astrophysics? What's going on here? I'm trying
I'm in
to figure this
touch.
out. Still trying to figure it out.
It's not hard to figure out. It's all from the Quran. If I prioritize it enough to bring it to you, it's because it's from if it's from me or somebody else, I usually tell you that this is Dr. Joe Dispenza, this is Bruce Lipton. But when I'm bringing you generalized information about what's happening cosmically, mimetically, genetically, that's in the Quran. I just showed you how the 46th ayat is dealing with stuff that the DNA is dealing with, and your DNA, your chromosomes at least, come in 23 and 23, which equals 46. That's from the Quran. That's not from Bruce Lipton. But Bruce Lipton will appreciate it. We're about to introduce it to him. Where are you, on 125th Street, my friend? I'm looking at the Carver Bank behind you.
Oh, yeah, it looks like that. Yeah, but I'm downtown by the Atlantic Terminal.
Oh, you're in Brooklyn. Brooklyn. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we gotta close out here, and those people in the Atlantic area will be tuning in if they're not already in. And I have a special 1-hour class with them every Sunday at 3 o'clock. That's their meeting time. So I hope you've appreciated everything that you heard today. Write down any questions. You can email them to me. Don't text me long. Email me that. I really don't like to keep my face in my cell phone, but so long. So when we got to go back and forth, when you got long discourses, just reduce it to an email so you can say everything in one shot. Okay? At least I like reading my emails. I really don't like reading text messages unless they're short. Okay. All right. So we thank you for being here with us. In 60 seconds, I'll be joining on to the other group. If you're not a member of the Atlantic class, this upcoming 3 o'clock class is not for you. It's for them. And the replay will only be shared with that class because we're dealing with where they are. They finished the Nunetics book. They're into the Quranic Connections book. And we're going page for page in those texts. So even if you tuned in, you might not be on the level that they're on. So thank you for where you are, and I thank them for where they are, and I'll be listening for them in about 2 minutes or so. What I want you to do, Atlanta, if you're listening, close out of this class, so we'll have a separate recording, and then sign back in, and I'll be there on the other end waiting for you, inshallah. As I greet you in the greetings of peace that obligate each and every one of us to keep the peace. Salamun alaikum to you all.
Wa alaikum salam.
Good teachings.
Wa alaikum
Alaikum salam.
All right.
Alaikum salam.